More than a podcast, this is now a Pogacar. If you've been watching the Tour de France, you can expect him to be competing for the yellow jersey. And as I start this episode, I have to feel that I'm doing something a little different than a podcast. And his name comes to mind, and it does start with that P.O. And maybe I am seeking this as just a car, and it's not necessarily a pod, but it's a pog. This week's episode, I wanted to start with an idea that centers on something that Tadej Pogacar does really well. And the thought is how to want everything. And if you were to think more intuitively about this idea, you might think of it first with an idea of gratitude and an idea that embraces what comes. And as for where you can begin to manifest, where that of what you are seeing as everything is the world, or at a high degree of your attainment in its competition, I wanted to center more on the fact of what want might be. And that if we can get to this word of want closer to where I've described the word read, maybe it's about wanting everything such that to want it determines itself within that new reactive point and direction that want really means. That as you're embracing your world, so much as you could say that, oh yeah, I wanted that, hopefully you could determine so slightly that of what you are receiving, that you're saying that you're wanting, closer and closer to what everything would be. And so how to want everything? I don't know. I think it leaves a lot to then be considered as to, well, then what would be next? This episode will look at everything, it'll look at nothing, it'll look at anything. And it'll also look at something. And so as you then think about everything, maybe there is something to be parsed about the ways that you need to objectify what you see in your world as everything. And then there's how to want everything. It's more that you're seeking to everify everything, or, well, then those constructs and concepts, the reality that you see is not necessarily everything unless you are wanting and want everything. This week's episode, again, will also kind of try to destruct the concept of everything, and you'll see how it has become much of nothing. And so I'd like to think nothing as well, except the fact that there are contrasts and there are differences between that reality that you see, and exceeding beyond a concept of nothing. We're going to get into the fact that at that point you can start to see more of the somethings that were outside of what you were thinking as nothing. because what I've seen this episode is much more of the degree in which you try to determine and try and separate the different ideas, the ideological objects of those ideas, and how we can begin to methodologically, with like a method, like a scientifically operate towards things that don't necessarily have so much of a meaning. And I think it's been much of a test towards where we can get to at our limits right now will only be broken down by the different types of thinking that science and math have used to continue to pick apart that which we have already. So, how to want everything? Thank nothing. And we'll see what we can see. Glossary. What began as a play on the word thought, with a T missing at the end, thos, and then with insight jumped to glossary. Bridge the gap into an available comparison with glossary, and finding the root of that word to be glossa, with the meaning of tongue, it invites one to think that thosa might be seen as the mind's tongue, the area of the brain that articulates the motion of an ideological center in our common understanding of the world in which we live. I seek to explore the current occurrency of normal typicality within our mental modes of cognition. I've recorded sound bites to the sound effects of various frequent happenings that I believe will most help a shaping of advance into further parts of speech by looking at where those words of ours start, the events of change that give us pause. I will use those effects in effect to build each weekly episode onto a based segmentation of what comes to inspire best, a partition of the week's news and considerable perspective writings that with every prayerful sighting might bring an evolved ability to adorn our expressions of the language and use with greater fluidity and meaning and complexity toward progression. So, with each episode building a more developed approach and ultimately a larger sequencing of our communication, I will examine the bigger points of view and present a glossary of thinking that, with diligence, aligns missing pieces to the puzzle that is society's confusing mix of histories in a form that I think helps put edge to edge and befitting in many flexibilities, gives access to deeper purposing when it seems most impossible at present to see music in the messy with any clarity. Glossary. Wish me anything but luck. Episode 8. Is it hard to do that? Should I try? This episode really centers around this title and the statement of wish me luck, as if there is something much assumed in that statement, but it's also kind of like break a leg, where it's idiomatic and kind of stands to be much of a null set towards what's really happening. And so when I think about wish me anything but luck, I think, okay, well, what else can I wish you? Or is there something problematic with wishing me luck? or a benefit maybe more so, that an absence of somebody else's desired luck upon you is actually somewhat giving of a conditional that is perceivably something that you would want. And one of the big things that I've definitely juggled in compiling this thought together is, well, does a wish impart anything objectifiable other than the redirection of a certain moment in time that needs something maybe more miraculous, as you can be so lucky and happen upon some sort of raffle or lottery, and much to the odds and chance say that there was nothing much there, and within an operation and a performative receiving of luck, is there luck even needed, or is it more tied up in the fact that luck really represents the way that the world wants to treat you, and the way that an individual that would receive that luck might respond to said luck? And within this whole kind of fiasco of this episode being something that really evolved into a feeling that it was to be a topic that kind of was my best doing of something I really didn't have much to say about. And as much as this series of podcast episodes is to be something that I am operating upon the normal, operating upon the collective truth of our natural operations without an impart or so much of a subtle refinement to what is really there. I think when I think about the way this episode started to feel to me, it's kind of magnificent that it has turned into something that really represents a value that I seek in the total compilation of these different ideas, that I'm not so much hoping to create anew, but I'm hoping to definitely rediscover. And it's kind of like the paleontologist perspective, so ever carefully remove the detractions of meaning and the covering of our misplaced assumptions in order to reveal what has really been there so truly. Don't talk to me. Wasn't planning on it. Was an idea that kind of, I think, relates into the fact that not wishing luck is sometimes almost seen as like a feeling that you are trying to distance yourself from the individual that is maybe asking for this. Repeatedly, each of these glossaried topics are to be, within the title, something that is explored through the episode, but largely also become much of a word within our thinking. as if communicating "wish me anything but luck" is something that is important. And what does that really bring to the conversation that you're having with somebody? So, "don't talk to me" and "wasn't planning on it" really is kind of like, okay, well, whoever wouldn't be talking to me might believe that if they did talk to me, they were going to give me luck. And as much as a ghosting or a absence of reply and acceptance into communication with somebody is talking to somebody, how much is luck really truly derived out of the sum total of influential communication somebody has? And within a planning of it, there's a next derivative of the fact that in heed of this statement, there's also a sense of, okay, well, maybe communicating with somebody is to give somebody luck. And if you aren't to plan on it, there is within what I'm sort of observing about the insights to this title, again, because these points here to begin with are certainly things that struck a chord with where I was trying to exist with the meditation on the title. To not plan on further communication is something difficult and absolutely requires some sort of protective order or that sort of thing, though, I would say. And what is it we're looking for? With luck, a lot of times we're seeking something. And if I was to reveal a conclusion about these first three topics, these "don't talk to me," "wasn't planning on it," and is it hard to do that? Should I try? As if you're stepping into something you haven't done before. And what is it we're looking for? Like, there's a search party going on and I'm joining, but is there any luck involved? There's situations that we seek luck, or at least would perceive that it would be coming. And so determinably assigned by the outcome, as if within the good chance the result was determined by something that we very much use the word luck for. But what is it we're looking for with a sense of trying to say, "wish me anything but luck"? I've spent a little bit more time than normal trying to really imagine what this means, and I kind of feel more comfortable with the sense that I don't want luck out of saying it. That to some degree, I do not wish upon anybody to try and impart any change to my chance in it. Though initially, I was thinking, this is a really cool challenge and much of a public display of a request for somebody to try and crack the code on wishes, because wish and luck, and as strong as a wish might be, a dream is a long sense of wish. A dream is a wish your heart makes. So proceeding out of a very strong vein of our common cultures as a song. But Can you wish something more than luck? Is a wish something that can exceed that bound of luck? Again, is this being something that, does it spark the challenge to have a wish mean something more than what exists within the possible set of chance outcomes? I don't necessarily say that it would, because when I think about wish, I think it's a W-ish. W-ish. Me luck. Try and put this all together. Do you want me to succeed? Do you want everything so that my completion of this task with the perceived great luck that might be upon me, seeking back towards that introductory topic of how to want everything, the want and the wish and the ish. Ish doesn't have to be something that is so non-conformatively certain. There's a good consideration there that ish might be something that is truly needed. And I'll get to a further point there where the uncertainty, it's actually, now that I think about it, I think much of the next episode that will try and pat down the sense that in those moments of ish, there's something that we can be better about. But as we think about wish me anything but luck, wish me anything but luck, I think, again, this episode will get to the fact that when we're looking at things that are very much up in the air and undefinable, we can look at some really clear ways that are commonly used in science and math to deepen our potential analysis of those that cause confusion, a true befuddlement, a smudging of the spirit that we might seek to always have as a good clarity. And as we seek closer to that point of true objectivity, there is every reason and no reason but our instantaneous decision on that which we know already and that which is coming. This episode is impossible, and that's a feeling that I've had in preparing it. But impossible, it's a word that has really given breath to this prefix of im, and that it seeks this break, it seeks this smashing of the glass ceiling that is what is definably an impossible, something that is preventative. But as I've seen impossible and I've heard of fantastic individuals that are seeking to break the perceived impossible into what is possible, I've had to see that im and impossible is directing us to think about the fact that M is right where the confluence of our human progression so necessitates a perfect, every force has an equal and opposing force, but those equal and opposing forces within that moment, if so held up by inequality, can prelude the happening of what is so said as impossible, saying that it takes a very certain circumstance for that impossibility to occur. And well, is that luck? Not so much, but if there's only very, very of a small chance to a chance occurring, that it is so said impossible beforehand, but then in the occurrence of its possibility, so much to be said about how much that M relates to luck. And wish me anything but luck. This can feel like an Excalibur moment, and the hunch that strides into the unknown, that which is impossible, sometimes is much without that perfect M, a waste of one's time. So, wish me anything but luck might be, do not direct me to anything impossible, because that is not the path that I seek. But also conglomerated into this mystery of, well, can I wish anything but luck upon you? Are wishes purely just the operation upon our chances into the future of possibility? There is a different sort of countenance of exactly where this episode still is going. And I'd maybe like to leave it as something that is not quite so determined, but when I think about, again, this whole kind of attempt into creating a thossery of the operative things that don't quite make sense but maybe ought to, it's each of these sections that altogether is to kind of break down and sculpt things that need more than just another word, a synonym, in the back of my life's book to be of value. But nonetheless, there to be things that you ought to quite know in understanding the rest of my book. But is this episode impossible? At one point, that seemed like the next step. That seemed like exactly where I was headed, and it connects to that sense that this episode was to be creating out of nothing. My best attempt at speaking fluidly and with direction at something that wasn't ever going to have an answer. Philosophically, I mean, that's something that probably is a philosopher's best dialectal kind of pigeonhole to find themselves into, as much as a philosophy can come and go and be something that takes a whole class to bring about different attempts at its application. That maybe the impossibility of certain philosophies is certain exactly where the next level of thinking can be, again, protruding into our reality, which really brings a key core idea of this topic into its sense again. And I'll just say it so we can maybe sort of pounce and pontificate into its place again later on here. But that as we look for things that are there, and we try to eliminate what might be a confounding variable, something that is influencing what we're so seeing, when we find a balance, when we find a meeting place that two polar opposites exist at, a lot of times that is where we start to see, oh, there's this other polarity, there's this other piece of our signage, of our balanced equation that now becomes something that is more operating. Saying that if there's ever so many variables into our livelihoods, that once you neutralize one, then that's when we start to see the whole rest of the equation. So as we neutralize maybe the way that wishing is connected to luck, we can then see where wishing is connected to other things. And for the blank slate of everything, I want to say that as much as these insights in the notes of this chapter come to mean something that is unseen without a great due diligence about what felt right to post into the notes of this chapter, I want to say that there's exactly something to say that the intro, the hot take of this point to say how to want everything, might relate to where we nullify some of these differences. And as we move along and we try to negate the different variables into their null set upon the polarities and changeability that those spectrumed influences might connect to, maybe that's where we're really getting to this first great idea of how to really want everything. What is the significance? I think we're really getting into a lot of the ideas that spurred some of the inspiration to begin this trail into Wish Me Anything But Luck. But where this alarm came to meaning was a consideration of where luck applies to near-death situations. And further thinking led me to the kind of root of this idea that some things we need to apply the scientific and mathematical approaches that we are familiar with to get to the bottom of some of these things that we're less familiar with. As near death is something that I saw as somewhat of an asymptote, or applying a limit to the equation of maybe this topic, this chapter, this episode, or particularly this equation of our livelihoods. And that luck, as we think about it towards death, sometimes it is that miraculously saving thing that within our calamity of potential falling out and seizing, that maybe it's in that moment everything is colluding towards zero, but it's luck that stands identifiably and unique and solely as that which is the bounce back towards that equation's continued running. And, well, the significance of this wish me anything but luck is something that might reveal more basically with a step back that these topics, again, as maybe any of our words that would be found in a glossary, desire much more of our intended creativity and perplexed sense of mystery towards whether or not we really have a grasp over what they are saying and their meanings. Their defining is something that, taken for granted, is very commonly, upon a learning of what our world is about and how to commune with those that also understand these words, saying it's only one side of the equation, but then in really trying to dive in and understand what these different words and glossary entries are getting into, that's where we can try to apply our own senses of experience. And as so abruptly we might be sent into alarm over their topics, whether they be in moments of confusion because we don't know what another person is saying, or that there is a strong value and worthiness of their deeper analysis, can start to bring their significances into picture. And I'd say that I would really hope, as much as I've worked around this idea and thought towards, well, what can I really say about it? I'm kind of left with not a lot on my plate unless I can start to play around with what I have here on the plate. That trying to learn and apply these different applications of math, such as seeking the limit of this kind of concept, is something that I really hope for you to grasp into as something that you can appreciate, as something that will continue the depth of this other side towards what our words so holding place can mean and, well, I want to say, like, offer to us as somewhat of everything. That how to want everything, and that idea of want, or, well, are we everything? Are we seeing everything in reality? There's much to say we ought to really keep working, putting our thoughts into the meaning and toiling with so much of the uncomfortable chaos with the applied means of sanctities into what will help us feel outside of this realm that is probably with a state of false sanity and peace. That we spend so much of our time going through school as we learn things and we take, things for what we're told they're to mean. But let's also start to think that there's a death to our considering, and that wishing me anything but luck might be exactly what you need to say in order to stay within the passing orbit of what might be death. And that luck isn't necessarily so much of avoiding death, but it might be assigned for a moment, I think, very communally and insightfully, with the beauty that there's a thought of when you die, when you might die, when you're coming so close to death that you are brought back. Everything in your equation is saying death, but it's not luck that's keeping you alive. It's something else that you had to go do. I think that's a very romantic thought that people will assign that near-death experiences revival and excusal from the ending that might be so presented as let's keep having things to do and wish me anything but luck. Keep me away from this sense that everything is working as it should. Because I know myself, and I hope you know, that I'm still seeking. And if I didn't believe in luck, or I thought that luck was only the mystery, maybe thinking about this equation as things that, okay, well, if everything else is saying zero when this limit of near death is explored, that luck would be the only thing that would survive my meaning. The intersect of those, to me right now, is saying that we want to say that luck is still everything that we don't understand. And I think that hits right at home with the fact that we assign luck to these certain instances in which the high outcome of a low chance opportunity comes into place. That we use luck with its sense of we don't really know what happens. We should say it's more the mystery. Meeting at the border. This idea, and trying to get it through to my dad, actually, as much of a precursor towards my presentation here, I found that it stands more pointedly as an instance of the segments, their creation, that they should be things that can be more or less much away from the topic before they find closer to the real heart of the topic. And what I meant by meeting at the border was that there's something kind of cool about an idea of a petri dish with two different bacterial cultures, and with the food amongst the petri dish, as they reproduce and create the further opportunity, they grow and develop across with the needed energy, then there's a border created. And it's a very common kind of, as resources are consumed and the different competing organisms reach into the void, that the border is very much determined where they run into each other. So thinking about the sovereignty of our countries even, and where there's been the borders defined by more or less that competing instinct of resourced, determined, collective, constructive, and altogether pointed truth towards the outcome of where those two populations are working is where I started with this. And applying further this sense of, well, a border. Do we all have borders? Do we all have our own sovereignty? And extrasensorily, too, where there's a meeting of where our individual selves are expanding into the world of our possibilities. With luck and competition, there is only the places and the resources and the realms of our further succeeding that within occupation are definitively things that we are agreeing into. And whether or not an individual gets to that border is something that I think, in an idea of crossing it as well, is the more epistemological notion of where you get to know that other entity. That you have to get to that border in order to truly meet. And as we try to pull in this "wish me anything but luck" title here, and think about the light being turned on with meeting at the border, this sense that as we wish people things, that the circumstantial success of our great chance happenings, all is so said and told that there is really something to be seen, the turning of the light on, in the fact that so much of what we are wishing for people outside of luck is that maybe the resources and the agreement of where we're meeting is something that is indefinably luck. That there was a true reason, well, beyond reason, there was something so outside of chance that border was created where it was. As that is where we would meet. That is where we, as true characters, playing out our roles in the environments in which we were there was nothing that was so undefinably by chance. And when we think about the way that our different international relations come upon these thosseries, as I seek them to be things that garner a sense of penance and release from that which brings anger or maybe even argument, that I'm really seeking to say that, okay, well, this is exactly where things are as where they should be. The way I understand God is that this idea of wanting everything, even, is that identifiably we've always entirely been seeking for a God-centered and God-governed experience. How great, as much as that might be diluting of where you feel comfortable, how much better do you feel knowing that you get to know somebody as you really get to know them? And our interpersonal dealings with people that we come across, it's most pointedly when we feel blindsided by the unknown and the untold characters of our storylines that truly, really hurt us more deeply. That if we were to think about each as their own individual character, and that's you and that's me, and as we're all just swimming and winning, hopefully, towards that which brings the allowance of good grace. As I started off saying, that the ideas that I hopefully uncover are things that we've non-negotiably had to accept through our coming, and that they're likely already existing exactly as they have been. As much as thinking about the sovereignty or the boundaries of a different country, well, they were decided by a river. They were decided by a mountain range. There wasn't much to be said about the fact that we were going to have this lane and they were going to have that region. But as we meet at that border, and wishing me anything but luck, get that weird chance out of here. Everything is well determined, and we are as we are. Have your eyes adjusted? And is it a little bit more relaxing to encompass this sense that as we meet at the border of our experience and of our life and death, that we really want to say, I bid away the sense that these limited perspectives are doing much of what I could never quite say, and that the good chance of where we meet is what I truly want to summon and to be into, because that is exactly where I think I want to be, and that is where everything. And as I so decided to descend into this abyssal nothing and look at the differences and try and say, well, this needs a lot more debate. But upon all the goodness in what we choose to agree on, as if luck could be so all hidden by the fact that we haven't chosen to see. That as we seek this path, it'll all coincide. And we can be grateful, and knowing that we really get to know each other. Something I was doing too late is the note that I had for this segment. And so I'd like to just get all the pieces on the table and say that I'd like to touch on that it's something. And that too late is there too luck? Late and luck might be well definably compared here. When I was thinking about something I was doing, it wasn't so immediately aware to the deeper truth of an individual that I was talking to. That there was a bigger sense in the things that they weren't thinking about to the world than they were acknowledging. And so this is kind of a little bit of a red pill, I think, in some regard, because if it was something you were doing, was it everything you were doing? And if they were doing it, did they not even quite acknowledge how much that they were doing it? And well, was it too late? Or was it too much luck? This is the unlock section, the unlock segment. And so sectioned into this world we are, that we need to know that we're doing a whole big test with different sections, I mean. And as there's the segmentation of that which we try to delve into with other individuals, sometimes there can be a sense that things are too late. And I would say more intuitively that there's still everything in that. And in meeting at the border, there is nothing more to be said at a certain point as to where that border came to be exactly where you would meet. But something I was doing too late is a hearty topic, and I think it's a sensitive one, as much as it would reveal that when we think about things being too late, in most cases it signifies that what was the desired protocol and objectively desired sensitive hope was delineated. It disintegrated. And if this was so wish me anything but luck and it was something I was doing, well, sorry, I wasn't trying to talk to you. I wasn't planning on imparting a hopefulness into your life, and that what mattered to you was not what really mattered to me. It's frustrating and maybe depressing as we hope to be in concordance with those around us and their emotions in a way that is proliferating. But if it was something that you were doing, if it was a true value set of your own that so governing upon everybody else's wish of everything, where exactly does late come in? Would you accept a late assignment, much as this episode is falling into place beyond its normalized? I don't know. I mean, I'm recording this episode about a week after I intended to publish it. And I was hesitant, yes. I was also feeling like I wasn't ready to have all the great ideas together that I would want to share. And as everything compiles upon what we would so as say right, maybe exactly of where it is too late, there might be too luck also being something that is similarly forgone and unacceptable. And if you were to maybe say something I was doing to luck, it might also be too late. But all in impossibility's sake, late and the luck might be similarly without the creed of what we would hope is that which is. So if it was something you were doing, maybe you ought to look at it and try and say, well, how is it everything I was doing? How do I make that something that is, and we'll make that something. How is it that I make that everything? You don't always know when the cards are gonna shuffle. But here's this week's card shuffle, where I would like there to be a sense of politics, a sense of there needing to be different classes of hot topics still, yes, but also the different points of view that hopefully together can operate a little bit with a kind of refracting that brings this all together. And I would say that as I randomize this list, I do seek exactly how many times to randomize it. First, Iran's defectors. Revisiting the potential postulations about what Iran really means to us and how in conflict and how much of a threat, danger that they pose, I thought about how much those living in Iran might dislike and within political turmoil, work to dismantle and the inner spurious nature of those that have a touch and a awareness of the outside world, even within not wanting to be in a war as much as we have our different politicalized movements that are opposing what is largely probably what other countries think America wanted to do right now. And as successfully or not they are at breaking that type of intention down. In Iran, we ought to think about how much we know that there are likely individuals that have defected and disagree with that which would potentially lead to their undoing, their annihilation, even so much that the positive of maybe our own internalized politics is to be said that we need to still be looking at the whole realm of our continuous thoughtfulnesses about that which is important and that which isn't. And that, again, each voice still really needs to be heard. But as much as each voice still needs to be heard, there's still the individuals that are creating the powerful movements of our futures that don't want to step into that which they cannot be entirely confident in. Number 2, snuff. So you snuff a torch, snuff. S-N-U-F-F. Maybe it's snuff. It's enough. That's all. And it extinguishes. It extinguishes a fire that, as I thought of this word in my own work to seek and destroy truly something that I thought was absolutely incorrect, I thought, okay, I'm snuffing the flames, and I think what I really liked about it, what I really wanted to share about it, was that if snuff was a whole episode, I think we would really feel positive about that which we continue to do. Putting out fires, another sort of idiom, but within wrong ideologies, there is absolutely a blaze. There is that which is waiting to catch fire, and that is the fire that is entirely there without putting out the fire. Decidedly, I would say that what I sought to snuff out this week was an individual in my life, and not necessarily who they are, but that which they believed. And it was truly kind of an exorcism as I saw it, because it was the ending of the line for the manifest anger, the impositive power that was created out of an ideal that is exactly in line with the Dalai Lama. It's exactly in line with monarchy. It's exactly in line with the individuals that seek a carrying of a torch for the past characters that might align with them or not. We should not seek to understand where other people have been and disregard a sense of our own needed individuality. As we complete and conduct our connective conversation with that which isn't here, we need to be most true to what we know is relevant today. I spend much of my time thinking about whether or not people in the future are going to appreciate different habits I have now. And I also think about how much I love the idea of caring for my pets and think about, gosh, like, am I really trying to bring a credence to the efforts of farmers in my past? If there was one thing to know about me, I really desire to live on a farm. And as I was not barreling or shoveling out, I don't know, I guess what do you do with hay? I don't even know. But I put some hay around for my hamsters today, and I also put out some old hay that I found in my garage on my back patio for my cats to get a spark of newfound influence and maybe a little bit more of a homebody of the barn cats, that I actually really had to impart upon them, because at least one of them was like, I don't like that smell. But for me, I love the idea of hay and barns, and it makes me connect with memories that I've had about what has been centuries, millennia of success for our humanity that I feel that I'm truly called to, I think, to give the beacon of my family's direction. I don't know how many people in my family were farmers, but it's not something that I'm saying, okay, well, I will be a farmer. It's, I appreciate some aspect of that living, and I'm going to live my life, so said, with the right kind of illusion and be happy with that. But that which is no good is no good. Number 3, bullying. I had an insight this week that just happened to be a sense of what bullying is. And within the magnificence of wanting to share it with you, I thought more previously, actually, now that it comes, that it's a bull market. It's a bull market right now. Put your money in the market. It is a worthy investment right now to say that the overall return and balance of where your funds would be returning to is going to benefit you. But, well, then I said this topic number 3 is bullying. It made me think about how much bullying, is it a natural reaction towards an individual that needs to be a little bit more of a bull? So think about, there's a bully, and they, within the definition of bully, I guess they're sort of bully, right? And within whatever type of phenomenon is really there, there's more to be said. But is bullying seeking to give a little bit of power to those that feel that kind of pain, that within the times of the victimhood of those that are bullied. How much do we need to see it a little bit more like, hey man, like, put a little, or woman, hey you, put a little bit more into it all. Invest. It's a bull market here. And be a little bit more of yourself. As I would hope that all of that and the saying of it and the consideration within oversight is maybe really beneficial. Number 4, in the mix. In any song, it's really quite untold who's a part of that song, but it's said that you're in the mix. I've had really quite interesting moments listening to a few different songs. It's maybe lesser of as exquisite of an instance it was. It's happened very rarely. But listening to a few different songs in my life, I've felt immediately connected to probably the studio impart into the world, as if the creation of that song was immediately singing to me. And I think that's a common experience. I think that happens for everybody. As different songs lead us into the parts of our lives that that song's origin sought to be reaching. But if you were to think about mix, and this came first in this list here, as mix being spelled M'(X), and you were to forget about that I a little bit and more focus into the M and the '(X), I think you can expand what it means to be in the mix. And this directive, this topic of a shuffled potential, truly meant, or thoughtfully, inspiredly meant to say that where true happiness comes is when you know you're a part of that song. Number 5, Sate. Satan. But it's spelled Sate. And sating, hating, this topic came to me because, truthfully, I was exploring a sense of hatred, as so much of where our current say no to hate and all of that is, truthfully, well, it strikes a part of me that says, okay, well, we can't have the word hate. We can't put this into a more realistic sense of our actions. If we were to, again, have a whole episode titled Hate, I think I would have some important things to say. But I thought of, well, there's Sate. And, well, Satan. Are we sating? Satan. I think Sate is a worse word than hate. But it's maybe more constructive. And well, if we were to think about the S and the H and the differences, I think of Sate as something that is very much like late because it has the 8 and we're 8 of what we're Satan for. That there's a bending. And I think, well, we can be Satan for anybody we want. We can be hating upon whatever we feel needing to be hated. But there's the H. Largely, I think it has a sense of primary position. Something that probably shouldn't be so situated. Because maybe the sate part is more important, but the sate part about it is that there's a bending of it all, because the S and the curve of its character is something that bends to it. You know, I think if we were to think about, well, sate, what is it? It's a hatred that, or it is hating that is allowably morphological in its operation. And well, are these shuffles related to Wish Me Anything But Luck? I guess a little bit. And that initial idea of where there's this needing of luck and maybe an avoidance of another person to try and circumnavigate a sense of giving that luck. A sate is something that is really needing its ability to give and receive the variability of something that is further occurring. And so am I saying that in order to wish me anything but luck, you have to sate? Yes. Number 6, the fires in Canada. I saw some really magnificent, some quite particularly striking footage of different fightings of the fires in Canada, and I thought, well, okay, that's sort of the global warming issues of today, much on display, advertising the fact that we're losing a large degree of biomass, and is that a problem? And I tried to look a little bit into the history of the fires in Canada, and it's limited. There's a limit to knowing of the vast expanse of all those forests and their histories, but is it truly global warming? I think it is. I think it's likely having an effect, and I think about some of the forests that exist a little farther southward with the degree of a warmer climate that have probably evolved somewhat to exist with the threat of certain fires coming onto them, and knowing that much of those forests that can still burn farther south will absolutely erupt into where they are and be replaced by different forestry that survives in a better climate as the evolution of our ecosystems will proceed. But that's just so trivially. I really wanted to dig into this because I felt like I had a good insight when I was thinking about the fires in Canada, and what came upon me was the fact that there might be an expected lifetime of forests and the trees within what is normally so much of a mature growth forest. And it was interesting for me to kind of digest this kind of thought where there's a need for evolution and there's a need for the right kind of biology to proceed. And I don't know it so well, but I suppose each pine cone still has a little bit of a different variability to the genetics of itself. And the trees that live to be older are more likely to pass on what might be a slightly mutated version of themselves. Thinking of more pine trees, I mean, we could probably go further into the different other types of plants that are evolving and changing too, but I was really just thinking of the pine trees here. And it made me wonder how much those older forests begin to exhibit signs of age. And that's the primary point that I was met with, that I wanted to leave you with, that as those trees grow and grow and grow and probably outcompete even some of the trees that have grown for 40 or 50 years themselves, but those ones that grow really tall are potentially going to leave different genetics into where they grow next. And so that evolution of a forest is something that I think is something that is exciting. And I mean, I put out a little bit of a Facebook post about it, but I'd even say that it might even lead to longevity research. And not necessarily wanting to jump entirely into that, I would also say that I think about the great sequoia redwood trees of Sequoia National Park, and I think about how big those trees are, and within any sort of conspiracy, it's like, well, do those hold something that might be extraterrestrial, even? As we understand that forests like to have a life cycle. Huge alarm dinner bell on this thought, that forests appreciate fires, the generativity of new generations, the trees that grow up to be as tall as is so successfully relevant to their further generations. If there was any sort of control or understanding about where in that genetic line there's a sense to say, okay, well, once we sort of get so big, like, we can expect a fire, or we might be inviting a fire. That within the nature, within the big picture of energy and the way that so God would change that tree, maybe there's something really magnificent about the fact that they are more waiting to die, because the next generation is exactly what more or less life is right there in. Number 7, a step past farming. So think about the farmer. We've already brought it up a little bit. And a farmer, what do they think about? They think about maximizing the yield of their plants and their animals, their livestock. Their agricultural specialization is absolutely attuned. They understand the different aspects of their products, their produce, that brings about their livelihood, and they pass it down. And if you thought buildings were interesting and the masonry of our human architectures were fantastic, what if you were to imagine that within farming there was also so much of a mystery? I've found in thinking about my pets and getting into a little bit of animal husbandry with my hamsters. And I have bigger plans about where that will go, but I've had 2 litters so far, and I've taken different steps towards working into whether or not there's the right things or the wrong things to do, and having sort of a hands-off approach, or wondering if I can get a little bit more involved with the productivity of the offspring, and trying to assist the mother in the development, I'm saying. But this whole topic is really, well, this whole topic takes a dark turn. And the step past farming is one where the farmer has exceeded the bounds of his farming potential. Well, and that's a different sort of thing. And I'm kind of forgetting exactly what I was going to present with this, but essentially it goes towards where that previous idea that I brought about as grazing by intervention, and that a farmer understands that they need to sort of help the grazing, and that our population, our economy would be benefited by a similar approach, where we need to understand and will proliferate a productively new and counter-instinctual grazing. There's something dangerous about thinking about how much a farmer knows how to manipulate life, and where that farmer then might step into a different realm of business. And I don't think I'm going to remember exactly where I was so surprised by that, because it's probably not the idea to carry. But there's also really dark things about sensing that we are farm animals and we are livestock, which is more accepted. But I'll just say this week I had a true step into seeing exactly where a successful farmer of the early 1900s might have gone into business and more or less turned a lot of humans into livestock. What will we do next? The next topic, number 8. This one, I kind of wanted to bring about more into wish me anything but luck. But what next? What am I doing next? Is that something I was doing? Is there something that I should wish you next, or am I not wishing at all? I think with this topic, I actually want to go towards, well, what next is close to mixed, next, that, well, what are we going to do next, closer towards the mix? But what are we going to do next? I think maybe try and understand the mix and bring about the actual groundedness of that. But there's a lot. There's a lot that has been said, and I'm trying to bring it all together into the final topic here, I guess. And, well, with that one, what do you do next after you wish anybody anything but luck? There is maybe just an absentee about where we can learn that there was something I was doing. I was right here. I'm still absolutely doing it. So maybe it's a little bit of a window into that. Regardless, I'd like you to think about the way that mix and being in the mix is like being in the next. So said, the final topic, number 9. my Jurassic World critique and review, which happens to come up here to finalize the whole episode. Wish me anything but luck. You can't have luck in a world with a bunch of dinosaurs, I suppose, as the trivial take. But I thought it was a good movie. I think there's something more interesting, and it's really trying to take this pivotal thematic of, okay, well, we got too close into things, and look, now we have dinosaurs and they're totally running rampant around the equator. Jurassic Park has been a favorite movie for me since I was a very young kid. It absolutely formed the base tone of my fear response and overcoming, said with courage, untestable courage. But so we think about Jurassic Park, and it's hitting that meat of, well, you're trying to play God. You're trying to bring about something into life that was said extinct, and are you willing to stand on the science that you have already? I thought maybe there's other types of movies that, in a different realm of our technological advance, there's the possibility of creating a whole another sort of series that explores that same thing, that if we didn't do this, we wouldn't have Jurassic Park, we wouldn't have this type of danger. And where else are we playing God? So, as it's quoted, there is many different ways to put that. But Jurassic World Rebirth, it was interesting to think about how much a kid that saw it today would put it up on their shelf as a movie that defined them. And I thought it was really great. It was very strong thematically, striking, again, compared to the first one that was much more subdued in that sense and a lot more one particular fluid line of things. This one definitely had a lot of, oh, try and think about that, try and think about that. But it wasn't because we had already seen much of those things. And they sparked the memory bank of our perspectives a little bit. I wonder how much, as time goes on, it'll maybe start to feel like it is a little bit more in a steady state. But I hope even more that each of those considerations might fall into a steady state. A steady state. A steady state of what has been said and within the hypocrisies. Fall to null. So to be without luck, because as far as you can wish me anything, I hope that you're just there to know me, and I'll be there to know you.